Welcome to the Story Lab. Today, we will tackle part 2 of our attempt to complete one of the greatest science fiction stories that were never completed, Babylon 5's Crusade. Welcome to part 2 of 2, to our completed version of Crusade. So, what happened so far? In the original series, the Drakh have infected Earth with a plague that will kill every human within the next 5 years. The Excalibur, under the command of Captain Gideon, was tasked with searching the galaxy for a cure. Gideon assembled quite the illustrious crew, but they learned to work well together. Jurij, a former thief, even becomes a fighter for good, a galactic knight. The only character that is still very much doubted is Galen, the technomage, who seems to have ulterior motives with the mission he is supporting. In our new version, after chasing the Drakh away and even revealing a secret Earth Shadow vessel program, the search for the cure starts to become more desperate. It is now that Gideon often locks himself up in a room with his apocalypse box, learning to rely on it for coming up with new coordinates to search. Meanwhile, the crew discovers signs pointing to a new threat when they discover Gideon's old ship completely destroyed. This is almost forgotten though, when the crew reaches the former home world of the technomages and discovers that they not only used to work for the Shadows, but also had a cure ready all this time. One thing is still missing in our story, the main villain. So, who is it going to be? This is a story about characters. We have seen in the story up until now, how the mistrust between Galen and Gideon has almost led to multiple catastrophes, not least the last time we saw them, when they were battling it out only to be stopped by Jurij. This aspect of the story still has to be resolved, however, it is clear that this will no longer be the central conflict of the story. Instead, we will need a new villain. We already prepared for that last time out, but that story has not yet played out. The new villain should also be character-driven, following a real motive that for some reason is supposed to stop the Excalibur from delivering the cure. Naturally, they will also need a strong force that is a real threat to the battleship that is the Excalibur. There is one character in our show that up to this point has been very much underused and which would make the biggest turn from light to dark if she were to become the villain: Dr. Chambers. With these thoughts ready, let's put our ingredients for this part 2 together. The story from the previous presentation. The conflict between Gideon and Galen will have to be fully resolved. Dr. Chambers will turn into a villain and try to stop the Excalibur. The Excalibur will encounter a new dangerous villain that delays the return of the cure. The cure will eventually reach Earth, but this does not necessarily have to be the finale of the show. The show shall end with the 3rd season, but the greater story may continue beyond. To keep the story fresh, at least one new character shall be introduced. The mixture is already being analyzed. And we are ready. Here comes the next part of our Crusade 2nd season. Previously the following happened: the crew in orbit detects the massive energy from the fight, but at that time the supernova does occur and the Excalibur has to make a jump into hyperspace. Being hit by the nova while in the vortex, the ship gets thrown away into the depths of hyperspace. On the planet, Gideon and Galen are still fighting, destroying the complex in the process. Finally, Jurij jumps between the two, severing the energy bands with her sword. There is a flash of light. Season 2, Episode 11, Lost Souls. The Excalibur is adrift in hyperspace. They have no idea where they are. Matheson commands to exit hyperspace randomly, but they still have no idea where they are. Everyone is demotivated. Matheson decides to start with repairing the ship. Chambers is furious after learning that the cure had not been brought aboard. She is so upset that she hardly realizes that Ilison is finally waking up. Meanwhile, on the mage planet, everyone is unconscious, except Jurij, who is waiting, still standing in the middle between Gideon and Galen. When they wake up, Jurij attempts to make peace between them. The box is destroyed, the Excalibur is gone, and the shield is losing power. There was no chance to start fighting again. The rest of the research group then presses to leave the planet, but Jurij insists on talking everything out first. It is a long discussion, led by Jurij, with Galen and Gideon only shouting at each other. Finally, they settle on a ceasefire, not yet ready to forgive one another. Jurij is okay with this. Galen now leads the whole team to another strange-looking complex. In there they find a transporter, and Galen explains that it connects this planet to others in the star systems nearby. On the Excalibur, Ilison wakes up and asks, "What happened?" Episode 13, The Lost Ship. Ilison comes to the bridge, hearing what had happened. Without hesitation, and to everyone's surprise, he immediately allows the crew to interface with his data crystals to try and find any clue to their position. They identify a certain star cluster, which is named in an old text as the origin of an ancient race. They start flying towards it. On the way, Matheson assembles the team, asking who should command from now on. Chambers does not even come, still promising her lover she wouldn't leave the medlab until she found a way to replicate the cure. All others vote immediately in favor of Matheson, he being the only one to choose someone else. Matheson has to get used to the idea. Episode 14, Trip, Fall Down and Stand Up Again. We meet Gideon and company in a library in a destroyed city. The inhabitants of this world have killed each other in a nuclear war. From the texts and the knowledge Galen reveals, they learn more about the platform network. They decide to continue going to nearby planets, until they find a way to get back to the Excalibur or Earth. Meanwhile, on the Excalibur, the engine breaks down. A young engineer, Thomas Exeter, fixes the problem, being promoted to chief engineer by Matheson. Episode 15, Harmony. Gideon and company are exploring a world, which they have reached via transporter. It seems to be unpopulated, until they detect that the plants are actually sentient. Jurij goes into a strange living cave, learning more about the plants. She forces Gideon and Galen to go into it too, and they both experience harmony, albeit in very different ways. Meanwhile, the Excalibur has arrived at the cluster and has met some vendors. They want to buy some information from the vendors, but these ask for intercourse as payment. The thing can eventually be settled when Ilison can persuade them to take a potentially priceless artifact instead. Everyone is surprised learning that Ilison hadn't tricked them, but really given away an ancient artifact. Lurking danger, the Excalibur learns of a populated planet and decide to go there. When arriving, they find that the entire civilization has been eradicated. Flying to the next world, they catch up with a powerful enemy fleet. Nearly destroyed by the unprovoked attackers, the Excalibur manages to hide in the corona sphere of a star. Hidden, they discuss this dangerous new enemy, not coming to a conclusion what to do about them. Sarah Chambers is still not part of all of this. Worried, Matheson tries to talk to her in MedLab, but the doctor is impulsive and even threatens the commanding officer. Matheson is not sure what to do about her. Eat and be eaten. Having spent the last episode with the Excalibur, we now learn what Gideon, Galen, Jurij and company have experienced. They are currently stranded on a jungle planet, living in a cave on the mountainside. It turns out that the transport platform on this world is surrounded by predators. They attack the predators multiple times, always being outsmarted. Finally, Galen has to give Gideon some of his tech, so that he can trick the beasts and lead the team back to the platform. The struggle of an engineer, the crew of the Excalibur is quite sure that they are on the wrong side of the galaxy and thus set a course towards the galactic center. Again, they run into the enemy fleet, barely making it out. Matheson then decides that it is time to upgrade the main weapon. Exeter is put to the job, but it isn't easy. The young officer comes to a conflict, not sure whether he should tell the commander he can't do it, or not. Meanwhile, Gideon and company have to wait out the passing of a sandstorm. Gideon feels that he is getting loose from the box's influence. The sword and the circle, Gideon and company reach a new planet. While Jurij is scouting, a troop of Indian-like aliens comes upon the rest of the group, taking Gideon and Galen prisoner. Strapped to martyr stakes, the two have another long talk, by the end of which they have finally gained their respect for one another again. Jurij comes to save them. The Indians have great respect from Jurij, and they all become friends. The Indians tell the group about a race of energy beings, which live among the planets reachable through the transporter network and could help Gideon and company find back to their ship. Dangerous areas. The Excalibur has a close encounter with the enemy fleet again, but it can outrun them and reach the destination planet, a world technologically close to Earth. While Matheson and Eilerson try to convince the local government to see the coming danger, Dr. Sarah Chambers starts to give orders on the ship, commanding to fly to a nearby moon, to search for something that would help her cure her lover. The moon is a restricted area, almost causing a major incident. Matheson stops the operation and takes away the command capabilities from Chambers. She is furious, but then the enemies arrive and the Excalibur must flee. The last breath, Gideon, Galen, Jurij, and their team are searching through all the planet of the network to find the world with the luminous beings. They encounter different dangers and wonders. At the same time, Sarah Chambers starts to lose hope in treating Tristan's group. As the members of the group start to die, Chambers gets increasingly desperate, spending all of her time in medlab and working on experimental cures, leading to some painful deaths for some of the patients. The two stories work opposite, Gideon's getting more hopeful, Chambers more panicking. In the end, she cannot save Tristan and he dies under her care. Chambers collapses crying. Gideon's group, however, does find the planet and transports there. But when they arrive, Gideon discovers that he is now alone. The lake, Gideon encounters the energy beings, who have isolated him and are showing him an illusion of a place on Earth. Gideon is tested, having to prevail in a number of familiar and non-familiar situations. The beings clear his soul. Gideon starts to understand his role in the story. The energy beings show him an illusion of the Excalibur at the bottom of the lake. When by the end of the episode, Gideon is ready, they tell him to dive for it and take it up. Gideon does so, and when he reaches for the ship, he and all members of his group suddenly appear on the bridge. And now we let Season 3 of Crusade begin. The once and future captain? The crew is back together, but still stranded on the edge of the galaxy. The Cure is now aboard, but the Tristan group is already dead, and Chambers has locked herself into a room. Her spirit is utterly destroyed. The crew discusses the events of the past few weeks and who would be the captain. Finally, Matheson is chosen, and now officially promoted, with Gideon believing that his role in this story is not the captain. Darkened Soul, the crew is investigating the attacks of the unknown enemy and to their shock finds that the fleet is heading straight for Alliance space and Earth in particular. Meanwhile, the science crew is investigating the Cure further, making it ready for mass production. The scientists frequently try to get Chambers to help them, but she stays in her room. Finally, Gideon goes to talk to her. She lets him in, but she's clearly gone crazy, shouting at Gideon and in the end even knocking him out and fleeing. This is where the episode ends, rather abruptly. Fury, Matheson feels that something is wrong and tries to call Gideon. Because he doesn't reach him, they go investigate and find Gideon, just waking up. He tells them of Chambers, and soon it is known that she is on a furious rampage throughout the ship, trying to sabotage. Jurij confronts Chambers, as she is trying to sabotage in a non-gravitated area. Because they're in EVA suits, the fight ends in a stalemate. The rest of the command crew arrives, but Chambers fires a weapon at section of the wall, blowing them out into space. Jurij manages to get everyone back on board, but Chambers is gone and the Excalibur has no time to search for her, as the enemy fleet is just arriving again. The Excalibur flees and Chambers is picked up by the enemies, swearing allegiance to them and revenge on the Excalibur and on Earth. Supply run, the crew knows that they have to make their way back to Earth fast, to warn them of the coming enemy fleet. They consider what supplies they would need and go to a nice uninhabited planet to pick up some food. The ground team then gets attacked by a dinosaur. A great danger to our cause, Sarah Chambers is brought before the leader of the enemy fleet. She states that the Excalibur is a great problem for the attackers, as she could warn Earth of their coming. The enemies agree and give her a task force to try and destroy the Excalibur. She attacks the ship, trying to get them to use the main gun. It works, and she immediately takes advantage of the ship being temporarily incapacitated. The Excalibur barely makes it, but they can be repelled when Galen scrambles their sensors. Matheson uses his telepathic abilities and realizes who had attacked them. The missing milestone, the crew finally detects a jump gate and thus a connection to the beacon system in hyperspace. However, one of the beacons is missing. The crew searches for the next beacon in hyperspace, but cannot find it, but Galen detects an eel-like creature living in hyperspace. He manages to contact it, and it gladly shows the crew the way to the next beacon. A Dark Ages story Part 1, having failed at her last attempt, Chambers is planning a new attack on the Excalibur. The ship is currently located above a lonely world with a technologically equal species, which does however uphold medieval values, especially that their king will only talk to noble men. While Jurij impresses with her knighting skills, Chambers' attack fleet enters the atmosphere and boards the Excalibur. Matheson and the crew are taken out by a stun grenade. On the planet, the simple people discover that Galen is a mage and sentence him to death. A Dark Ages story Part 2, Chambers' attack continues. Since Matheson is out and Gideon on the planet, Ilison offers himself to lead the campaign against Chambers on board. Down in the medieval town, Gideon and Jurij plan how to rescue Galen from the dungeons. Ilison thinks of an ingenious trap and kills the entire Entercommando save Chambers. But she embraces her villainess and blows up all her minions, causing enough disturbance for her to escape. Meanwhile, Gideon and Jurij save Galen by diplomacy. A wife for Matheson, the crew tries to buy an enhancer module for their drive system to increase speed. A woman vendor is ready to trade, but her price is to marry Matheson. During the light-hearted episode, the vendor is courting Matheson constantly, while he tries to stay away from her. The rest of the crew is making more or less helpful comments about the affair. Le Fay, this episode is looking at everything from Sarah Chambers' perspective. She is alone and definitely crazy aboard the enemy ship. She cries and shouts at the walls, carving symbols into the ground, but then she starts yet another attack on the Excalibur. We learn through her perspective that the enemies are actually not people but highly sophisticated androids. Everything works out fine for her, until she realizes that Gideon is not on board. He appears with a cloaked Star Fury. Galen has given the crew the technology to experiment with. Chambers sacrifices some of her team but manages to escape again and even take the cloaked Star Fury away. Then she returns to her dark room. Murphy's Law, Ilison and Exeter are examining one of the attackers left behind by Chambers, discovering that it's not a life form. But despite believing they had deactivated it, the android's self-destruct activates. Exeter is wounded and the jump drive is damaged. Since Exeter is wounded, Ilison runs back and forth asking Exeter in the med lab what to do and doing it. The rest of the crew is enjoying some card games with Galen, Jurij, and Matheson trying to trick the others using their abilities and Gideon winning in the end because of his gambling experience. As fast as possible, since the drive system has taken a beating, the Excalibur has lost most of its head start to the enemy fleet. After a briefing, Galen offers to take the cure back to Earth with his ship. He and Gideon go through with it, while Matheson turns the ship and attacks the fleet. They damage the mothership, but this only leads to Chambers assuming command of the entire enemy fleet. Galen and Gideon arrive on Earth unexpectedly. Babysitting, Galen and Gideon are debriefed, while the cure is distributed around the planet. In hyperspace, the Excalibur is trying to force the enemies through a jump gate into normal space. But Chambers outsmarts them and damages the jump gate. A civilian transport is stranded as a result. Reluctantly, the crew agrees to escort them to their destination 3 days away. The passengers are not all good guests though. The Vault of the Mage, Galen and Gideon are on Earth, but have to wait until the cure is distributed to everyone before leaving the planet again. Galen theorizes that there might be an old Techno-Mage vault on Earth. He and Gideon travel to England to search for it, but members of Sacred Omega shoot down their shuttle and try to kill them. Thanks to their teamwork, they prevail and find the secret vault. In it are some cool Technomage weapons such as a flaming sword, which Gideon takes for himself. The road to Camlan, to his surprise, Gideon is made commander of the defense fleet. He is planning on how to destroy the enemy fleet. Galen makes remarks like, "We are fighting a friend that has become an enemy, maybe we should consider an enemy to become our friend," and Gideon finally gets it. They ask for more secret shadow research sites. Meanwhile, the Excalibur is making another series of attack runs against the enemy fleet, this time from behind and aided by several white stars. They manage to slow them down, but will it be enough? The battle, Gideon's fleet is ready. Jump points open and the Excalibur with several white stars appears. Right behind them comes the enemy fleet. Gideon orders the Earth Destroyers to press the attack, so that the damaged Excalibur can get behind them. But Chambers orders her forces to concentrate on the Excalibur as a breakthrough point. So, Gideon changes his mind and lets the Excalibur fire her main gun. While the ship is incapacitated, the enemies slip by. But Gideon has a surprise ready. Galen appears with his Technomage ship and two completely functional shadow hybrids. They charge Chambers' fleet and destroy several ships. The enemy retreats. Gideon uses this break to go over to the Excalibur and form a plan with his crew. They prepare a shock troop to infiltrate the mothership of Chambers' fleet, Gideon hoping that they could still save Chambers from her dark path. The enemy is just starting a new attack. The Excalibur presses the attack to bring the shock troop as close as possible. They have to fire the main gun, making them a sitting target in the middle of the battlefield. But just as they are about to get destroyed, a second Victory-class starship appears. Sovereign, this is the story of the second ship. It starts right after the Drakh attack, with the construction start. Then we see it growing with the crew appearing one after another. Some technical problems arise. Then the message that the Excalibur has disappeared reaches them. The construction continues. Then out of nowhere appears Captain Susan Ivanova to take out the ship right away. The Sovereign is nowhere near being finished, but Ivanova says they're needed to defend Earth. On the fly there they just about manage to get the guns ready, then we see them drop into the fight as in the last episode. Everyone cheers and the Sovereign joins the fight. Beyond the line, the shock troop of Gideon is boarding the mothership of the enemy fleet. They slowly make their way through the corridors. Meanwhile, the surprise appearance of the Sovereign and her support ships has turned the battle for the most part. It's mostly the capital ships firing at each other from a distance now. The Excalibur is getting hit critically. Exeter detects that the central energy reactor is damaged. To his surprise, Ileson appears with his most valuable artifact. He destroys it right then and there and reveals that there is a power crystal inside it. They connect it to the ship and the Excalibur is suddenly back in shape. Back on the enemy mothership, Gideon is ambushed by the enemy and loses most of his team. Gideon himself, Galen and Jurij make it to the command room though and challenge Chambers. She fuses with an android to battle them. Chambers manages to severely wound Galen, before her android part is taken out by Gideon's fire sword and Jurij pins her down. They try to give her a last chance, but Chambers just cries out loudly, activating the self-destruct of the mothership. Jurij is shortly distracted, giving Chambers time to wound her and flee. Gideon just about manages to get his comrades out in time. They eject themselves in a life pod, but get hit by the explosion. Matheson senses them and charges with the Excalibur, picking them up right in the middle of the fight and immediately jumping to hyperspace. Until the very last moment, with the Excalibur having disappeared from the battle, the Earth fleet is pushed back a little into orbit. When the Sovereign shoots down a ship now, it falls towards Earth and crashes onto the surface. But the people of Earth, who were just rioting all around the planet, are now standing together and attack any surviving android. On the new command ship of the fleet, Chambers is ordering to continue pressing the attack, even though her fleet is clearly outgunned at this point. Chambers is also severely wounded, but refuses any medical help. Crouching on the ground, she just keeps ordering to press the attack and destroy as many humans as possible. In hyperspace, Galen and Jurij are brought to MedLab, while Matheson inspects the ship, doubting that she will be able to fight again anytime soon. Gideon thinks about their options and decides to take the second cloaked Star Fury to attack again. He flies an attack, but Chambers has installed sensors to detect a cloaked ship and thus shoots him down. Gideon is now sure what he has to do: make a kamikaze run on the command ship. Matheson, who was sure he knew what Gideon had planned, meanwhile asked his crew if they would be willing to sacrifice their lives for a chance to save Gideon. They all agree. So, in the moment where Gideon is about to crash the ship, the Excalibur appears right on top of them, swoops down and destroys the command ship and Sarah Chambers with it in one single blow. Heavily damaged, the Excalibur just about manages to stabilize again, after taking Gideon aboard. The battle is won. Ruling from beyond the tomb, aftermath, Galen is still being treated aboard the Excalibur. Jurij is fine now and joins Gideon and Matheson as they go to Earth Dome to be debriefed and congratulated. Ileson is a guest at Exeter's house, showing himself from the best side and catching the eye of Exeter's sister. In Earth Dome, President Sheridan himself appears to decorate the commanders of the battle. But the last members of the Sacred Omega group launch an attack at the President during this meeting. They do not succeed and Jurij spots them and starts to chase them. She brings them all down with her skill and they are brought before a trial. Jurij sees this as a sign that she should not, as she had originally planned, go back to her people and live with them, but should instead continue her work as a galactic knight for the entire galaxy. Repairs. The Excalibur has been brought to Babylon 5 for much-needed repairs. Matheson has been accepted as her commander and will take her out for new missions soon. Jurij is already on the way to make peace in Down Below, while Ileson is picking out one of the planets they had visited for his next archaeological expedition. Gideon meets Captain Lockley again, and the two again fall for each other, but again decide not to pursue the relationship any further. The light-hearted episode makes a turn, however, when Galen is freed from Medlab and comes to Gideon with news. He is quite certain that the androids, which had been their great enemy, are of a familiar design, made by technomags. Gideon and Galen discuss the matter for a while and then decide to investigate it together, searching for clues of the technomags' current whereabouts and why they would have created an army to attack Earth. The Diary of Matthew Gideon. We see different events with 5-year gaps, telling in part the story of Gideon and Galen's investigation of the technomags. This episode will have its own opening titles, being a callback to the first dialogue between Galen and Gideon. Who are you? Matthew Gideon. What do you want? To find out why the technomags attacked Earth. Where are you going? Anywhere I can. Who do you serve and who do you trust? You, my friend, Galen. It starts in the present, with Gideon and Galen leaving Babylon 5. Then we see them 5 years later as they are searching for a strange technomage contact on a market planet. They run into Jurij, who is helping the many people there who are in bad shape. Jurij helps them locate and catch the contact, who turns out to be just a hologram. Another 5 years later, Gideon and Galen visit the Excalibur, who had just led a major battle against the Drakh over Centauri Prime. Captain Matheson agrees to bring them out to the furthest known jump gate, so they can continue their investigation there. He asks what they have found out so far, but they do not tell him anything. Another 5 years later, a ship crash lands on a planet, where Ileson is conducting research. He is baffled to find Galen and Gideon in there, the latter clearly a technomage himself by now. They reveal that they have been attacked by other mags and are actually eager to get back to them. Ileson helps with the repairs and even gifts them a strange-looking chest. As they open it, they find that it contains an apocalypse box. Ileson is sure that they will know how and when to use it, and Gideon and Galen smile knowingly. They are sure to have a weapon now and leave again. Coming up with this story was an incredible journey. Let's shortly summarize. Season 1. The Excalibur searches for the cure. Jurij becomes a galactic knight. Gideon starts to mistrust Galen. The Drakh are driven away. Season 2. Gideon becomes absorbed by his apocalypse box. The crew discovers the technomage home world and the cure, but are flung away by a cosmic event, getting lost. Gideon, Jurij, and Galen work together to find a way back to the ship through portals left by an ancient civilization. Dr. Chamus' love interest dies from the plague. Season 3. The Excalibur rushes back towards Earth, chased by their new enemy, a fleet of androids. Dr. Chambers falls to evil and becomes the leader of that fleet. Gideon and Galen run ahead, distributing the cure on Earth and mustering its defenses against the android fleet. A final battle is fought, that is won. But the purpose of the mysterious enemy fleet remains elusive, and so, Galen and Gideon, now friends, go out into the galaxy to search for answers. Please note that everything presented here is simply the results of an experiment. No part of this presentation is intended as a correction of an existing story or claims to be the real story. The selection or omission of any parts of the source material is not to be understood as commentary, positive or negative, on the original productions. These are simply thoughts and experiments based on existing material, and none of it could be created without the work of all those involved in creating the original works. As with any scientific result, you may utilize any of the story ideas that resulted from these experiments for your own experiments or production, while citing this experiment as its source. It is now closing time for our lab. Goodbye until next time.